This is where I really am curious about your input. So wide receiver. Now I kept six, and of course, some of these it depends on how many numbers you keep at each position, right? You can take from one position and give to another as you go through this process. But I kept six, and the six I kept were pretty obvious ones: Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Cedric Tillman, and Marquise Goodwin. So then it came down to who my sixth was going to be. And this is making an assumption that this player is going to be 100% by the end of August or close to 100% by the end of August. I went ahead and kept Jakeem Grant. And I'll tell you kind of my reasoning for Grant over David Bell in particular. I kept Grant because it's a hard sell to say that Andrew Berry is going to cut a draft pick, a year after picking him. But my argument for Grant was he does more. He can be in the return game. I mean, if Bubba Ventrone goes into Andrew's office and says, I want him to be my returner, that's a pretty big advocate to have in this situation. So he can be effective in the return game. He can still offer you something offensively. And David Bell just doesn't do that stuff. And he's not really a valuable special teams player. And I think maybe you can get David Bell on the practice squad if you wanted to. So that was my initial thought. Am I wrong here? Do you think David Bell is a shoo-in? Because I did get some pushback on Twitter a little bit from some people that they didn't think there's a scenario where a guy like Bell gets cut.
You know what? At this point, I don't think that David Bell is going to get cut. I really don't. I think that David Bell, he actually had a nice offseason. He had nice OTAs, nice minicamp. I thought he did a nice job. And Andrew Berry does not part with those draft picks easily at all. And especially when you're talking about a higher draft pick. If you're talking about a fifth rounder, a sixth rounder, seventh, maybe. But he's not going to give up on a third rounder that quickly, in my estimation. I suppose they probably could get him on the practice squad if they wanted to, but there's a chance that they might not. I really don't think that they're going to give up on David Bell. They might have to keep 7. Jakeem could end up becoming sort of one of those just specially allotted special teams guys and doesn't have to necessarily go into the receiver room or under the receiver umbrella. But I don't think they're going to get rid of David Bell.
Yeah, and I think that's where, if I can just find maybe some other position where I can take somebody away, maybe that's how I fit a guy like David Bell on. Interestingly, I couldn't make a case for Anthony Schwartz either. He's another young guy and obviously not as recent a draft pick, but, I just found it really hard to make a case for keeping him. It did kind of come down to Grant versus Bell for me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. The thing about Anthony Schwartz is I think it's up to him in training camp to prove what he can do. And here's the reason why I say that. Because he's so darn fast and you can't manufacture that speed. And if there were a time when you could put 2 really fast guys out on the field in Marquise Goodwin and Anthony Schwartz, that's something that an offensive coordinator would love to be able to do, and a defensive coordinator would have a hard time stopping. So for that reason, I think he's got a chance, and you can't completely rule him out. Again, there's a numbers game here, and it's probably a long shot, but that is his saving grace, is his speed. Now, if he can put his football game together and be a football player this summer, then he has a chance to make the team. If he can't do that, then he has no chance to make the team. So it's up to him. I thought he looked pretty decent at times in minicamp and OTAs, but he really has to be consistent in these practices, especially against, a team like the Eagles in those joint practices. He's going to have to look good. And we've been saying this for a long time. He needs to get stronger mentally and physically. And if he has been able to do that, and if he has been able to put the other pieces of his game together and stay on the field, that's probably the most important thing for him. He's got to be able to stay on the field and be durable enough to play this game. If he can do those things, then he's got a chance. If not, no shot.
Now, revisiting kind of that top group, Cooper, right, a no-brainer. Peoples-Jones, a no-brainer. Elijah Moore, a no-brainer. There's no chance that Marquise Goodwin has to earn his spot, right? He's on, no doubt.
He's on again, once again, because of that special quality that you can't find everywhere, very difficult to find, is that blazing speed. And he's got it. And he showed up. He's showed up already in mini camp. So yeah, he's their vertical stretch guy. He's their number one guy to play that position. It was something that they lacked last year. They didn't have it. They thought they had it in Anthony Schwartz, but he wasn't ready for it yet. Now they have it. They're not going to give it up.
Okay, let's move on to